Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sat means truth, logos means a study or science. Sattology means a science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means a science of fake, lie, or imagination. Today we have chosen a very, very interesting topic because all of you who love Hindu culture, Sanatan Dharma, or Vedic culture, whatever you call it, uh, you understand that it brings peace. The only culture, the only system which brings peace is like a simple chanting of Om or Mahamantra or any mantra or Hare Krishna Mahamantra brings you peace. Now today I have very, very special guest. I call him a researcher, Muni, Rishi, Swami sometimes because he controls his senses. And Goswami will be called because he's married. And uh, you can say the modern teacher of the Vedic culture. And one more adjective, the Chanakya, because Chanakya was a very dharmic person. Many of you will kill me for that, but it's my heart. So without delay, let us welcome Sri Nilesh Nilkant Oak.
Namaste, Aditya ji. Well, you are going to give sleepless nights to many. I know they just really roll on different sides through the night. When they hear all these titles, you're giving it to me, and of course the critical thing is not to, when somebody praises you, not to get puffed up by those. That's why Upanishad tells us. What is that? Atha Brahmana, Tasmad Brahmana, Pandityam Nirvidya Balyena Tishtaset. You have to digest the Panditya and be like a child.
Yeah, amani raman dena
Kirtaniya Sadahari.
the honor man saman is like the dry ice. It's always advisable to give it to the previous acharya because they can handle it.
Yes.
So we don't keep any credit. So believe me, so many years people say you're a great speaker, this, that. I said, okay, all goes to my acharyas and Vedvyas, and because their knowledge we are presenting, and Valmiki. Now, the whole world is searching for God. Krishna says, Bhoktaram Yagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suridam Sarva Bhutanam Gyatva Mam Shantim Richati. People looking for peace. Krishna says, I am the peace. And then he says, Sar Dharman Parityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Raja. And that is repeated by Vaishampayan. So Krishna is saying, take my shelter. Vaishampayan is saying, take his shelter, Krishna's shelter. Ved Vyas is saying, take his shelter. And then Adi Sankaracharya says in Gita Mahatmya, take his shelter. Jayadev Goswami, Asita, Devala, Vyasa, Markandeya, Pulastya. You name any rishi anywhere. Markandeya Rishi, who has seen different days of Brahma, he tells Yudhishthir, he's the same Janardhan I saw when I was in the Pralay. So there are so many people talking about one person and saying that yes, he is Bhagwan. But despite that, so many ignorant people or jealous people or the political propagandists, they do not accept it. Why is that?
Okay. Well, I don't know if I know the answer to that. I mean, for everyone, but what one can comprehend. See, one may read something, one may listen to someone, and therefore we talk of the Navavidha Bhakti, like Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Vishnu Smaranam, uh, everything. But what, even if one sees it, what one can comprehend, I mean, I face this all the time with my research. People will read it, and they may be true. I mean, they may be telling the fact that they are reading it, but they don't comprehend, or they miscomprehend. They misunderstand, and it is directly related to the intellect. It is so. For example, we talk of Shraddha, we talk of Yajna. We talk of ahar, like a diet, nutrition. I mean, our diet. We talk of intellect, buddhi. But just we say somebody has a lot of buddhi, buddhiman. I mean, generally we take buddhiman as someone in the sense of a good, sharp intellect. But somebody may be buddhiman, but that buddhi could be all of a tamasi kind. Then what he or she is going to do is, whenever they learn something, read something, see something, because of the tamasic nature of that buddhi, they are going to understand it, or rather misunderstand it. They are going to understand it 180-degree opposite to what it's supposed to be understood. And but they are not going to notice that. They are not going to feel it that way. I mean, this one in a social media or even general interaction, you see it, right? Today's morning, I'll tell you, one individual, he had a question. So one of the YouTube video, possibly Sattology video, I don't remember exactly which one. He asked me a question. I took a quick time. I happened to see the comment, so I responded. Then he asked another question, not another question, the same question in a different language. And then I tried to respond. Then next time he asked the same question, I said, "Have you read my books?" Because the answers are there. And the person says, doesn't say anything about it. Sir, my question is this, meaning the person does not comprehend. Just so he possibly, I need to explain to that person, you need to read my books if to get the answer. I mean, what kind of intellect is that? Right now, this is not criticizing that individual, but factually describing the level of intellect of that individual. Now, this individual may be some simple fellow, and he might just accept my rebuke and go away with it. What happens when these same individuals, suddenly you put them a external covering, another covering, and put them in important places? Those important places could be in the politics, in governance, they could be in academia, they could be in as a social intellectuals. And suddenly, just because of the position, which is considered a fallacy, authority fallacy, just because someone is in an important position, we may think this person is supposed to understand, and then we feel frustrated. How come he or she does not understand or misunderstand? But Krishna is giving the answer to it. So, which is to say, we cannot get into a fallacy. Just because someone is in an important position, just because someone is in a respectable position as society sees it, is not a guarantee of a good comprehension. And that is true for understanding Bhagwan, understanding common sense. We say, the cliche about common sense is that it is not common, right? With just last point on the Bhagwan that you began with, I'll tell you one instance with Vinoba, Acharya Vinoba Bhave. When he was sitting in his late years, was in Paunar near Varda, the place that you know, and many people will visit him and ask questions of all kinds. So one time somebody, this may not be even from his old age, but he's recollecting it in his old age. So somebody came and asked Vinobaji, says like, do you think the God exists, Bhagwan exists? Of course, God is not, Bhagwan and God, they are not the translation of each other, but just for practical reason, we are using it. And Vinoba said, and so the person who asked the question, he was asking the question in a village, and there was this lantern. If you know the kandil, whatever you call the lantern, kerosene lantern, and just you can barely see the light. He said, do you, to Vinoba, ask the question, do you believe that the Bhagwan exists like as real as this lantern? And Vinoba's response to him was, he said, well, I am very confident that Bhagwan exists. I'm not so sure that this lantern exists. Okay. So so the second thing is, when we answer the question, so certain questions cannot be answered in a very empirical fashion. Okay, so we take help of, that's why this anumana, we take help of anumana, metaphor, but many times these people struggle to understand such language, or they think that somebody should respond to them, not realizing that certain things are to be only experienced. No matter how much some other person eats some sweet fudge or gulab jam or whatnot, until you try it, you're never going to experience what gulab jam is. I mean, you may get a partial experience. So that is a challenge. I mean, that is a challenge, and it's a huge challenge when we try to communicate things. And possibly that's the reason we have a Navavidha Bhakti. Only one way will not work.
You said very rightly, because the Tad Vidhi Pranipatena Pariprashrena, two qualities are needed.
Hmm.
if the questioner is not sincere, the answers will not touch his heart, because there is no paripatena, there is no intention to serve. The guru will just become a consultant.
Yeah.
So you'll just consultant, you don't have to hear. Consultant's job is to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
Those are the best consultants.
Exactly.
The most successful consultants are who don't give a straight answer.
Correct.
And they will tell you, they will first check what is your mood, what you want to hear.
Yes.
Unfortunately, guru and sadhu is not supposed to be like that.
Correct.
They're supposed to tell you which should wake you up, shake you up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the Bhagavad Puran talks about Jambu Dweep, is just to shake all your material conceptions, because we are talking about Koop Mandup Nyaya. We have only
Hmm.
seen the ocean, well.
Yeah. Well,
So
yeah.
for us, only well. So when the Jambu Dweep description comes,
Correct.
Parishit wakes up. He said, okay, something is going on.
Yeah.
Now
Is
we'll
this right? Is this how the universe is? Right? Yeah.
yeah. After that, four cantos are spoken.
Yeah.
चार स्कंद बोले जाते हैं उसके बाद, and then 10th canto comes,
Yeah.
where the complete life history of Krishna is explained
Yeah.
in a way. So
Yeah.
today we'll begin the presentation, and today we'll hear in summary short, so you get an idea,
Yeah.
and that where Krishna's from the astronomical proofs, archaeological proofs, and also the most important part is faithful proofs, like with the shraddha.
Yes.
Yeah, let's.
Shraddha is very important. You cannot do science without Shraddha, period. You
That's right.
cannot do science without Shraddha, you know. Okay, so let me start sharing. Uh, okay, here. And we'll look at some of the rituals also, like what you just mentioned, um, like how Guru would wake somebody up, right? Well, for example, um, and the
Exactly.
idea is like when Parikshit Maharaj heard started hearing about Jambudvipa, he kind of was shaken and awake. Some of the rituals that are done are meant for that. Like for example, now you are what you call the double initiated individual, for example, and so like Yajñopavit, when that ritual, like as a growing up childhood, I remember that's typically done preferably beyond before one reaches the age of 8, and it of course it can be done after, and many times it is done. And so I remember when that Marathi is called Munja, like Vratabandha. And so when it was done, like, other people are saying now, because that's when the child or boy now is going to get into the teenage years, the puberty,
Teenage. That's
and
right.
now, so the muscles are going to build, and they're saying, oh, so during this ceremony, they're going to make cuts in your arms, also in your thighs, and they're going to put frogs there, like the muscles, the muscles thing that we see. And so you are still young relatively, and everyone tries to make it believe more like a Santa Claus kind of thing, or the Halloween, that it's all going to be true. So you may be scared, but the point is to shake you up, that your childhood, like all the gobbledygook stuff, I mean, all the cajoling is going to be over now. You have to now become, get to study. We'll talk about that. Last time we actually stopped at Krishna's studying at Sandipani Muni. Up to that portion, I'm going to go very fast. But so what we'll do today is we will cover in a brief fashion the entire biography of Krishna. Now, naturally, we will not have time to go through every instance in Krishna's life. In fact, some of the most popular instances, something that people know about it, I'm going to avoid talking about them, okay? Because that's something they already kind of know. Okay, so one thing that, I mean, we briefly discussed that last time, but I didn't have this slide. So Krishna's birth, I mean, it happened 17th or 18th of June, 5633 BCE. It was the month of Shravan month, or for the North India, where the calendar is a Purnamanta, you can think of that as a Bhadrapad. Actual timing is exactly the same. Only the nomenclature changes. Like the South India, they will call that same particular day, same time as the month of Shravan. In the North, they for 15 days, they will call it month of Bhadrapad, because there is a gap of 15 days between the North Indian calendar and South Indian calendar, Purna Mantha versus Amantha, based on Amavasya to Amavasya versus Purnima to Purnima. What is important is the description of the time of Krishna's birth given in the Harivamsha, which is an appendix to Mahabharata, very beautifully match this time of the 6th millennium BCE. And so what is happening? So think of the timing of the lunar month. Now, how do we decide lunar month? By noting down the position of the full moon that will fall around Shravana Nakshatra or Bhadrapada Nakshatra, because Shravan and Bhadrapad. That is what I'm showing you here. I took the middle point of those two, like Shravana Dhanishta, then Shatabhishar, then Purva Bhadrapad, Uttara Bhadrapad. So I have aligned the full moon with the Shatabhishar. Now, to know the season, the Rutu, we have to go and note down the position of the sun as to where is the position of the sun. And notice it's not so much the nakshatra we need to note down there for the position of the sun, because it has nothing to do with a nakshatra. The season is decided simply by relative position of earth and sun. And so where is the position of the sun? It is in the Grishma Rutu. Now, Adityaji, I don't know, and I know you spent some time in Solapur, but if you are closer to Kolhapur and the Western Ghats, where the rice farming happens. Now, by the time you go to Solapur, mostly it's a wheat and corn, I think. I don't, and of course, sorghum. But if you look at the rice farming, and the reason I'm bringing this up is very interesting. So how far back in ancient times, in how the agriculture was established, but how it was done. Here, there are descriptions of, this is the time of a Grishma, the summer, early summer season. And there are descriptions of the trees being cut and they are stacked, okay, across the different areas as Vasudev, Krishna's father, is walking from one place to another, which is from Mathura to Gokula or Vrindavan or Vraja, wherever that area, and coming back. And what is he saying? He's seeing these dry trees and branches cut and stacked properly. Also important is to know that what he's seeing is that the land on which he's walking is dry land. There is a dust. Okay, it's not. There is no what do you call? I'm missing the word now. It's kitchen. What is the English word for that? Mud. There is no mud with the land, with the soil and water, but actually it's a dry land. And as he walks along the path, his feet are getting into the dry cow dung. Okay, that's the description that is given. Okay, so the timing matches beautifully with the Harivamsha descriptions and the 6th millennium BC. That is the point here. Now, another point, we briefly discussed that before. I mean, we have done episode on Krishna's longevity. But it's the point I want to mention is that, for just like you asked when we began, like why people read something and they don't understand, or how they don't realize that just because they read something, that is not the truth. It may be the truth, it may not be the truth. Okay. And how do we know? Because every time we are just going with what? Something that we know. By definition, what we know is going to be finite. By definition, what we don't know is going to be infinite. So our life, our progress in life, our knowledge, whatever activities we do, actually happens through a combination of what is truth and wouldn't say what is false, but I would say the ignorance of it. And therefore, we may not have an actual factual knowledge of it. In that sense, it's false. For example, even Adi Shankaracharya uses the term. Now, I don't know in what context he used it, but it's beautiful. He says, Satyandrute, Satya Anruta. Anruta means asatya. Like mythology kind of myth, you can say. Satyandrute dve mithuni krutya vartate lokayatra. People's living, people's journey, people's lives, interactions, everything, it happens based on the knowledge which is a mixture of Satya and Ruta. There is an element of truth, but there is an element of non-truth, unfortunately. Why? Because by definition, ignorance is going to be infinite and our knowledge is going to be finite. So the point is, anytime we are trying to find the information, you cannot just read somewhere and start shouting that that is the information. That could be true, that may not be true. And therefore, we talked about like the Shraddha. Now, in Shraddha, you can accept any information that comes to you. And you, if you feel that it is coming from a reliable source, okay, so this goes by the different name like a Shabda, Agama, but that does, even Shabda and Agama, it's a starting point. There is no guarantee that just because it's a background knowledge, there is no guarantee that it's a Shabda. There is no guarantee that just because it's a Agama, just because it is in some printed book form, or somebody saying it on a YouTube, or some recorded person, or some person in the sense of authority, some Swamiji, just by that itself, it does not mean that it is true. It could be true. There is a reason to believe, at least on a Shraddha, that it more likely will be true. And but you have to use always your intellect to analyze it if you care. It's perfectly okay to take something, use it based on a Shraddha. Now remember, what is very interesting, if people will use this Shraddha in the most wrong fashion, they will insist, oh, you should trust somebody saying it on a Shraddha, where it doesn't matter to them financially or immediately, but emotionally it matters to them. Whereas when it matters to them financially, even when the highest authority is telling them something, suppose somebody says, go here, here is a 2 crore rupees, they're not going to trust, they're going to count the numbers, So I think how people become diplomatic, and they say this. Back to this. So how old, how long was Krishna's lifetime, Krishna's longevity, when he came here as a Purnavatar? We don't have a one answer, but using the saksha, using the evidence, we can reach the best answer or better answer. So Bhagavan Krishna's lifespan, you can get at least, and there could be many other views or many other documentation, but I'm going to share 5. The first one is, it is said that Krishna lived for 125 years. It comes from Srimad Bhagavad Puran. Now, on the Shraddha, can we take it? Yeah, absolutely. You can just, if that satisfies you, take it and move on. Move on to the next question. But be aware that somebody else might give you a different number based on some other information source. And that could be right or wrong. So as soon as there are 2 different numbers, it is up to you what you want to do with it as an individual. If Vishnu Puran refers to Krishna's lifetime as more than 100 years, so it doesn't directly contradict Srimad Bhagavad Puran, but it is not saying 125, it says more than 100 years. There is an indirect reference from Upanishad, and this is where Aditya ji, many people, again, you ask me why they misunderstand. I don't know the answer. I just said, which is answer, I think, is the level of intellect, and then also Shraddha, and also, are they truly looking for the Sat in your Sattology? Or are they more going to go by the convenience to please someone like a consultant that you mentioned, okay? Or they have some ulterior motives. Anything can happen. Yes, there is in Chandogya Upanishad, I think, there is a reference to Ghora Angiras discussing with a Devaki Nandan or Devaki Putra Krishna. And people have made a chaos out of this reference, like they have created multiple Krishnas, multiple Devaki Putra Krishna based on these 2. We will keep that subject aside. But here the discussion is of the matra in each of the chanda that is used in composing the ruchas, composing the shloka, and so on. And when there are these 3 or 4 different chanda are taken and the number of matras are added, they add up to 116. And it could be said in a metaphorical fashion. Then the Rishi or Ghora Angiras is saying, hey, you know what? Study all this wonderful Vedic literature and live for 116 years, just like those 116 added up matras. Okay. Now, somebody took this information and thought that Krishna's total longevity, 116 years, is somehow given in an indirect fashion here. So therefore, they claim Krishna lived for 116 years. I do not see any basis for it, but it is very interesting to know if you ever come across 116 as a number. Then Dr. P.V. Vartak has given 101. And Aditya I'm going to discuss that if we have a time, how he came to 101, but why that is incorrect. Now, the numbers that I have given you, the top four, I have actually written blogs on it saying Krishna's longevity was 125 years. I have written another blog, Krishna's total lifetime to be 116 years. And I have written one more blog on Krishna's total lifetime to be 101 years. And now I'm going to present you something else. And I have no intention of deleting my previous blogs. That's how a sincere, truthful, factual, original research is done. Now, the fifth point I'm going to say is this is my, Aditya you would love to know, this is based on my discussions with a few Swamijis and other individuals, researchers from one of the, I don't know how many matha are there in the Madhvacharya Sampradaya, but very close circuit, there are, I think, 5 or 8 matha. I don't know the exact number. It is from one of the matha. Somebody very much into researching Madhvacharya Sampradaya literature. He brought me in touch with them. Both parties, he brought it together. We had a few discussions in person, like through Zoom or such thing, and through email. And so I'm very thankful to them. They gave me this one reference. Now, this is from Madhvacharya's Sri Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnay, and it is quoted down there exactly with the reference. The last 2 words are important. Saptamabdam Shatottaram, where Madhvacharya is writing that Krishna's lifetime was of 107 year plus. Okay, so I have taken that, and I am saying, I'm claiming today, asserting today, that that appears to be the best of this lot. Okay, now if you people want to go and see how I arrived at 125, well, from Bhagavad Puran, and what was my position at that point, or when I talked about 106 or 101, it is there in my blogs, and those blogs will always be there. And then I'll write one on 107 now. Again, that's how the research should be done. We do not eliminate something because that was, now we realize that that was an error. Vade vade jayate tattva bodho. That is how we make progress and our knowledge grows. Important to understand that in the ultimate analysis, our ignorance is going to be much bigger than the finite amount of knowledge that we will have. What is beautiful, what is amazing is that even with that finite knowledge, if we have a shraddha, if we have the prowess, if we have a desire to do karma, okay, the karma siddhanta, if we understand it, then life can still be beautiful. This one we have done, so I'll go fast. Harivamsha says that Krishna and Balaram lived in Vraja until they were 7 years old. Then Nanda made one transition, moved to another place within the same area. And so if you have a time, Aditya ji, you may refer to that. Again, my knowledge is limited there between, say, Gokula, sorry, not Goloka, Gokula, Vraja, Vrindavan, if there are any differences or similarities. Do you want to add any comments, Aditya ji?
Not really. I don't have any comments there.
Okay.
Okay, I had one before actually.
Yeah.
So when the date, like between when the Bhagavad was being spoken, Bhagavad Puran, which was spoken after the Mahabharata war, at that time, between intervals, Vaishampayan spoke Mahabharata actually. So that is another instance of Vaishampayan speaking Mahabharata. So he spoke in Takshila and also in Bhagavad Puran between time. So it was used as an entertainment in there. That's what I wanted to add. Please continue.
Okay, yeah. And so it's now wouldn't the Mahabharata would be later than Bhagavad Puran? So for example, if Shuka Goswami, of course, Vaishampayan is again narrating too, but Shuka Goswami is telling to Parikshit, and after Parikshit, Vaishampayan is telling to Janmejaya at the Sarpa Satra, which is essentially Janmejaya's, think of it as a Janmejaya's revenge, for Takshaka coming and killing his father.
No, you're right, because the Bhagavad Puran, so the 2 times it was spoken. One was also Bhagavad Puran was spoken to Parikshit, his father.
Yeah.
And that is where but Mahabharata was already ready by that time.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, Mahabharata is ready 18 years after the Mahabharata war.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so the Mahabharata was being spoken in intervals. It
Hmm.
is mentioned Bharata Akhyam. There's a word is
Ah,
used.
yes,
But
yes.
in Takshila, it was completely recited because that was only focus.
Correct, correct. And in fact, just to add to that, then it is been recited again in a Naimisharanya.
Naimisharanya
When,
also.
when
Third,
Roma Arshana Sauti goes to,
Suta
you know,
Goswami. Yeah.
and Shaunak Rishi, right there, in a
And very
Naimisharanya.
few, and a lot of people ask me,
Hmm.
Romaharshan Suta, what is the importance of Romaharshan Suta? He was Vyasdev's disciple,
Hmm.
and Romaharshan Suta is considered the author of all the Purana
Hmm. Hmm.
because his six disciples
Hmm.
created all the Purana, rewrote it.
Hmm. Hmm.
What was in Shruti? They wrote it
Hmm.
in Smriti.
Ah,
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah. So coming back to our story, so
Yes,
going
please.
fast there. So now Krishna turns 11 years, and until then he lived in the Gokul, Raja, Vrindavan, that area, and now he comes to Mathura and kills Kamsa. Now, just at the beginning, also you mentioned, I don't know whether when we were chatting offline, that's this beautiful verse comes in from Srimad Bhagavat. The second verse there down, so Durbhago bata lokoyam yadavo nitaramapi ye samvat santo na vidurhu hari mina ivodupam. Like how unfortunate is this world, and especially the Yadu dynasty, who living together with Krishna did not recognize the Bhagwan any more than the fishes do recognize the moon. So that is a what you can say, the interesting thing, that you can also say the tragedy, but the reality, you can say the factual reality, that great people are not recognized in their own times. They might be abused and will go through all kinds of torture. That's why many times it is said, we look at Bhagwan Krishna, Bhagwan Rama in a greatness, and totally we adore that, and of course we enjoy their pastimes. But if given a choice, hey, do you want to be like Krishna, go through the torture that Krishna went through? I mean, of course, it's not a torture to them, or Rama, like 14 varsh, 14 years of Vanvas. Then people will start thinking, So it's they also came, of course, to do this, but they were recognized as the avatar because of what they did. Okay, so someone just sitting lazily and trying to call oneself avatar is not going to work. Now, last time, I have done this before, possibly with you, but telling the Krishna Charitra, I did not have these references handy that time. So now Krishna is 11 years old. And this is the time. So 5633 BC to 5623 BC, 10 years old. Okay. And now I remember you mentioning Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur referring to 10 year and 7 months and that time period. Something very beautiful that I'm going to show you. So when he comes at that time, and say it's the spring season, let's say, and kills Kamsa. At that time, before this happens, Andhak is having conversation with Kamsa, and he's saying, this is a very bad time. I mean, you have done so much bad things and you're going to repay for it. In fact, Andhak says in a very tough language to Kamsa. And in that description, when he's in a way scolding Kamsa for all the bad things that Kamsa has done, Andak is telling Kamsa some of the astronomy nimittas, okay, the signs that are happening in the sky, and that Kamsa should be aware that the bad times for him are coming. Now, I'm going to discuss 4 or 5 of them. These come from Harivamsha. I'm giving you just quick reference there. Now, some of these are repetitive. We did the foundations of Archeo-Astronomy, so the planetary movements, they happen very frequently. Like Mars is going to complete one rotation in 1.88 years. That's less than 2 years. So they will happen frequently, but they were mentioned in a specific context, and I want to mention it. So here it is said, Vakram Angarakas Chakre Vyaharanti Karam Dvija. Like as if, there is the beauty of our text, that these are nimittas, or any references are given in a metaphorical fashion, so that they're entertaining, they're easy to remember. Okay, so Vakram Angarakas Chakre Vyaharanti Kharadvija, as if the Mars is riding a chariot that is pulled by 2 donkeys. That's what it is saying. Okay, 2 important things. So now, what is the position of a Mars at that time, just before Kamsa was killed? The Mars is here and very close to and going towards uh, with the Punarvasu stars, the Castor and Pollux in the modern astronomy. Very, very bright. These are part of the Mithuna constellation or the Gemini constellation, Gemini zodiac. Okay, those are bright stars. So that very likely is what the comparison is. But something else it tells us. I'm not going to go into technical detail, but the Vakra, that is the way Vakra is used in Harivamsha or in the Mahabharata. And Mahabharata, at least we have its usage 3 times, twice with respect to Mars and once with respect to Jupiter. And what the evidence tells us that Vakra in our times in astronomy, we use it to mean retrograde. In Mahabharata times, more than 7,500 years ago, it was absolutely not used in the sense of retrograde, but it was used. We have a sufficient evidence to show that it was used in the sense of oblique crossing of a planet, not just Mars, oblique crossing of a planet across this ecliptic. So this ecliptic, this yellow-green line, is the path of the sun as seen from the Earth. And Mars, sometime, or other planets also, they would cut that path, and go travel obliquely. Here, what you see is the Mars is right at the ecliptic. So it's on its way to crossing from one side to another. And that is also picked up here. Very beautiful. Because this Vakra plus 3 Vakras of Mahabharata, just even these 4 can take you to 5561 BC for the year of Mahabharata. It is that powerful. Each piece of evidence is that powerful. Then Harivamsha, at that time, Andak is telling Kamsa, also discusses a solar eclipse. Okay, again, eclipses are dime a dozen. My point is, you can never use eclipse to establish a certain date, but you can use, or you can only use eclipse evidence to corroborate something, but not to establish it. Only as a supporting evidence you can use. Yes, it can be shown that there was an eclipse on 8 March 5622 BC. Now, 5622 BC, Krishna is 10 years, between 10 and 11 years old, as said in the Bhagavad Puran, but also as validated by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Okay. Then another reference, it says, Esha Goro Grah Swatim Ullikhan Ke Gabhastibi. Okay. So some bad planet, Ghora Graha, evil planet, was near Swati. Now, for this date, there is no visible planet, at least known bad planet that is near Swati. The visible, I'm saying, not there, like say Mars or Saturn. But what you do have, and it's not very easy to see with the background, is that this is actually at the Swati in 5622 was the point of a Ketu. Therefore, I put the picture of a Ketu there. Okay. So the moon's path, moon's orbit is cutting the ecliptic going southward at that point, which is the point of a Ketu. If it would be going the northward, cutting the ecliptic, it would have been a path of a Rahu. Rahu. And here it is a Ketu. So that's what we can estimate. One more, again, not a dramatic reference, but it is important that, you see, for example, Budhena Paschima Sandhya Vyapta Gorena Tejasa. What it is saying is, after the sunset, Mercury was visible. Now, this is not a very rare phenomenon, but it is a rare phenomenon. First thing, to see Mercury itself is a very rare, number one. And second thing is, for all it matters, at that time, it could have been west of sun, in which case it will not be seen after the sunset. It would be only seen before the sunrise. So that is also valid. But you know what? I deliberately wanted to cover important factual and trivial phenomenon first, and leave the last one. This is brilliant. This is very unique in the last 8,000 years. And that evidence is here. Very unique, guys. Okay. In last 8,000 years, it has not happened. And then Aditya Ji, I'm going to tell you some what can I say? Some Chanakya. You called me Chanakya today, right? So I'm going to tell you a Chanakyan prediction, okay, of this. You will see with the fun of it. And I want people to get to work and get busy to search this.
So I didn't call you Chanakya in vain then, huh?
No, you didn't know, but you called for a reason, or you did know. As a premonition, let's say.
I didn't know that. It was just a guesswork.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a Chanakyan strategy today, okay? What I'm going to do. So this is also from Harivamsha. And the verse says, this is the important verse, guys, okay? The others are very repetitive. I mean, they can happen every 2 years, every 3 years, every 30 years. This one is very, very rare. How rare is this? Last 8,000 years, this is the only instance. Okay. And I'll tell you my Chanakya prediction. But let's do this first. The Harivansha verse says, Ketuna Dhuma Ketostu Nakshatrani Trayodasha Bharanyadini Bhinnani Nano Yanti Nishakram. So Andhaka is telling to Kamsa when Krishna is about 10-year-old, more than 10-year-old, so 11th year is going on, and this is the time Krishna killed Kamsa. So before Krishna kills Kamsa, Andhaka is discussing this. He's saying, Kamsa, I'm seeing all these different signs, nimitta, okay, in the sky, I mean everywhere, and not good for you. And Ketuna Dhuma Ketustu, there is a Dhuma Ketu, okay, comet, and it is basically disturbing, afflicting, whatever you want to call it, all the 13 nakshatras, Trayodasha. Okay. Why is this important? The comets come all the time. I mean, not very frequent phenomenon, but they are there. And usually you will find in some part of the sky, okay, they may not be along the ecliptic, but they could be in the north, and in the south, so not along the ecliptic. Usually they are visible because they become visible when they come closer into the solar system. And they're very, very small compared to any planet. So with the reflection of the sunlight and all, they become visible. So therefore they are visible. The best visible are before sunrise or after sunset. Okay, just at those points. And so that is the picture. The picture I'm showing you is just before sunrise. But the point is, they will be in some small part of the sky. But here the description is said that the Dhumaketu, that comet, was covering the 13 nakshatras, Trayodasha. And now what is the big deal about 13 nakshatra? See, total nakshatras are 27 into the 360 degrees. So 13 nakshatra means half of the 360 degree, which is to say, essentially the entire visible sky. Just imagine, and those of you who might have observed the comets, or you can just go and look at some YouTube videos of the comets in the last 100 years or last 20 years. This particular comet at that time is so bright, its brightness is so much, okay, that it is covering the whole sky, whole visible sky. This phenomenon, and what is that comet, by the way? In 5622, the comet is again the well-known, very famous Halley's comet. Okay, so that's one part, and it showed up in such a fashion that it was totally visible and covering the entire sky. This is not an ordinary phenomenon, something more. It says Bharanyadini Binnani Nanu Yanti Nishakaram. So where did it begin? Like, it has a core, and the core is where the brightest spot, and then it turns it into a tail, So where is that core? That core is right at the nakshatra Bharani. That's what it is referring to. So now we have a apparition of a comet that is covering the entire visible sky at sunrise, in this case, Trayodasha, all the 13 nakshatras, beginning with a Bharani, and as if like, again, the moon is here in the full moon kind of position, but that will be always there. As if it says, it is so bright that it has become difficult to follow the path of the moon in the sky, because you may not able to see all the nakshatras because of the brightness caused by this Dhumaketu. Now the Chanakya thing, Adityaji. So I said in last 8,000 years, this is the only instance when you are going to find any comet showing up in the sky, starting with a Bharani, and its magnitude and brightness and length so much that is going to cover the entire visible sky, 13 nakshatras. Okay, starting with a Bharani. Very, very unique situation. The Chanakya thing I'm going to tell you, the Chanakya prediction, is that other than this 5622 BCE, in the last 8,000 years, there is at least one instance, and there are not many instances. If there are more, maybe one or two, but one more instance when Halley's comet showed up in a similar fashion. I am going to give this as a predictions to the audience who may be listening, predictions to all other Mahabharata researchers, okay, and give them as a challenge to find that other instance. Okay, so yes, this is not the only unique instance. There is one more. But when or if they ever dare to find it, it is going to tell everyone the power of astronomy observations. Okay, that is the Chanakyan prediction that I am doing. Okay, so I'll move on. So how beautifully it matches with the Krishna's 11 years. The reason I'm saying this is, until now, until I showed you this astronomy evidence, yes, there were statements from Harivansha Puran, there were statements from Bhagavad Puran, and there are statements from Mahabharata too, and other Puranas. But why would somebody should trust 5633 BC as the birth year of Krishna? Just because I am saying it? Well, I didn't show any other empirical, objectively testable evidence until this evidence. Why this evidence becomes so important? Okay, and now I cannot just throw this one evidence to the audience and run away. No, now I have to show how this evidence perfectly matches with the rest of the Krishna's life evidence. Okay, and not just astronomy evidence. And that's I'm going to do it, and we're going to do it a bit fast. Okay, this one we discussed. So now Krishna killed Kamsa. He was 11 years old. He placed Ugrasena. Last time when we did it, Adityaji, I was saying Shurasena. That is a Shura Sena dynasty, and that area is called like a Shurasena country. But Ugrasena, Kamsa's father, who was re-established back on the throne by Krishna. Balaram lived there for a few years until Prapta Yavana, until they became like a youth, so that I'm just assuming around 16 years. And we have a reason to believe that, because there are descriptions in Vasudeva kind of thought these people are just enjoying their life, but they are not learned yet. They need to be sent to the Guru, And so Vasudeva sends them to Sandipani Muni. Okay. Now we have gone through this. So this is Sudama and Krishna. They lived in the Sandipani Muni's ashram. Krishna was a very bright student, dedicated student. In a very short time, he grasped all the 64 arts, okay, become good and expert in them. Then the time comes for Krishna's graduation, okay, the Vratasnatak and then the Vidyasnatak. And part of that is, it is a duty of a student to ask the Guru for a Guru Dakshina. Krishna does that. Sandipani Muni suggests that his son, Sandipani Muni's son, was taken away, by Panchajanya, but somebody, Sandipani Muni doesn't know that. He just only knows it's taken away. And if Krishna and Balaram can bring him back, Krishna accepts the request, goes there across the oceans to fights with the Panchajanya, okay, the Rakshasa you can call, and releases Sandipani's son and brings him back. In the process, he also gets the conch shell called Panchajanya. Panchajanya Rishikeshe Devadatta Dhananjay, that Panchajanya is the conch shell that Krishna is using. Okay. All right. Now we are going to fast forward to Mahabharata times. Now remember, 5622 BCE is when Krishna killed Kamsa, and at that time he was a 10-11-year-old. Now, what does that tell you? In 5561 BC, now 5561 BC, how did we arrive? We arrived based on 300 plus astronomy evidence of Mahabharata, or 100 plus different descriptions of river Saraswati. And then we combine those with the modern astronomy, Indian astronomy, geology, geophysics, geochemistry, morphodynamics of the rivers evidence, climatology evidence. And that's how we arrived at this. We have also looked at physical anthropology evidence of Professor Kennedy from Cornell, how that beautifully matches with 5561 BC. We'll have looked at genetic evidence, Monica Carmin's paper from 2015, and how the output of that paper beautifully matches with what happened during the Mahabharata war. Exclusive killing of the men, close to 4 million men in 5561 BC, and how that beautifully matches with the findings of Monica Carmin paper. So we have evidence from various fields beyond astronomy and beyond hydrology or beyond river science, from geology, archaeology, climatology, physical anthropology. So it's there. So what does that mean? Krishna was about 70 years old at the time of the war. Okay. And of course, don't forget that Drona was 85 years old. Bhishmacharya was already close to 140 plus years old, and so on. Okay, so it's a different times, more than 7,500 years ago. Maybe there was much more oxygen than we have today. This becomes another area for research. What if we can find out what are the conditions that existed 7,500 years ago, what kind of nutrition these people were taking, what kind of a lifestyle they had, and maybe that was the reason they could live longer in comparison to us. Not just live longer, at 70 years old, they could fight the battle. Okay. And 140-year-old Bhishmacharya or 85-year-old Dronacharya. Okay. So that's the one. Now I want to take you to one more thing, two more things. One is as soon as we talk of Krishna, as soon as we talk of a Mahabharata, usually the discussion immediately gets into Kali Yuga and the beginning of a Kali Yuga and the ending of a Kali Yuga. Okay. And I have discussed this elsewhere with Aditya ji, like 4 different types of Yuga and so on. But just if we have to follow the Mahabharata tradition, just the Mahabharata tradition, internal Mahabharata evidence, what does it has to say about the Kali Yuga? Again, I told you my conversation with the Swamis from the Madhvacharya Matha, and they referring to the reference from Madhvacharya's Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya that Krishna was about 107-year-old. Madhvacharya has also written this. He has said, Samarabdham Kaliyugam Yada Duryodhano Patat. When Duryodhan fell on the ground, okay, in the sense of Duryodhana's death, which happened on the 18th day of the war, that is when Kali Yuga began. But also, Madhvacharya is saying, again, he's a Krishna Bhakta, remember that, and he's in his interpretation, he's saying, Shatadri Shabdam Punah Krishna Krutam Mevanva Vartayat. However, because Krishna is still there, by his own potency, and that also matches with what Mahabharata says, Raja Kalasya Karanam. It is the king who decides what kind of yuga will prevail. Okay, so as long as Krishna is there, what Madhvacharya is saying is that as if the Kruta Yuga continued, the influence of Kruta Yuga continued. In fact, it's a Dwapar Yuga, but Krishna is there, and Madhvacharya is saying during Krishna's time, as if it's a many of the aspects of Satya Yuga prevailed. Okay, but he's also emphatic in saying that the Kali Yuga began on the last day of the Mahabharata war. Harimamsha says the same thing in a different language. Instead of saying when the Duryodhana was killed, Harimamsha says, this is again the Harimamsha, what I am quoting is a work of Jivan Rao, where Harimamsha says that when Ashwathama went to the Pandava camp at night, that was on the 18th day of the war, and killed the 5 sons of Draupadi and others like Drishtadyumna and whoever other Pandava warriors. That is when Kali Yuga began. That's what Harivamsha says. Again, the 18th day of the war. And what Jivan Rao has also done, and Aditya ji, again, we will get Jivan Rao and you to talk. Mahabharata has close to 100 plus different pieces of evidence, right from Adi Parva all the way to the Swargarohan Parva, in the context of Yuga, Yugakshay, Yuganta, and the Yuganta, and therefore beginning of a new Yuga, the name for Kali Yuga, when Kali Yuga began, why it is called Pushya Yuga, why it is called Tishya Yuga. Also a very specific reference that the Kali Yuga began on a Pushya Nakshatra. All of this comes together for the last day of the Mahabharata war, and that day happens to be 2 November or 2nd November 5561 BC, and again the nakshatra was Pusha. So that's one very important aspect of Kali Yuga, and couple more aspects. So now we fast forward to the flooding and destruction of Dwarka. So Krishna is again spending his time, additional 36 years in Dwarka. Now we know the Musala Parva, then what happens, and this Krishna's clan member starts fighting against among each other and so on. Okay. The place where Krishna pastime ended, Krishna's parinirvana, mahanirvana, whatever the word you want to use. Okay. After he's spending 107 plus years here, there is a place called Bhalka Tirtha in Gujarat. Okay. And again, in the sense of devotion, there could be a few other places. But here is one that I found. It is just north of Somnath. And just south of Somnath, if you go, there is a place called Mula Dwarka. Naturally, that's not the Mula Dwarka, but it is the closest destination to Mula Dwarka, the original Krishna's Dwarka, which is some 20 kilometers inside the sea, which was flooded in 5525 BCE. So now if you take Krishna's age, 5633 BC minus 5525 BC, it gets to 108 years. So that Saptamabdam Shatottaram makes sense. Okay. Now this is the last or 2 slides, Aditya ji. Now, if you look at the evidence for flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka in 5525 BCE. How much evidence is out there? We have discussed it on Sattology. I have discussed it in many places. What is fascinating is every day, not necessarily every day, I'm talking metaphorically, as the time passes, more and more evidence comes from all sides. I can't even keep up with who is providing me the information. I remember this was given to me by Savitri Mumukshuji from Twitter social media side of things. This is a 2017 paper in Nature. And the area that you're seeing is from the area of a Toba explosion, but nothing to do with the Toba explosion today. This is from the island of Sumatra from Indonesia. The place is very, very close to India, very close to Andaman Nicobar Islands. Okay. And that has a relevance, but I'll not talk about that. What this particular place did is beautifully, it preserved the evidence from Mahabharata times to our times. Okay. The flooding evidence. Now, the 5525 BCE as a prediction for the flooding and destruction of Dwarka, how did I arrive at that? Because there is a solid evidence based on Mahabharata for the war of the Mahabharata in 5561 BC. And same Mahabharata text tells you that the Dwarka was flooded and destroyed 36 years after the Mahabharata war. So 5561 BCE, you add 36 to it in the BCE parlor, okay? And therefore we get 5525 BC, 36 years after. Now here the evidence is beautiful. I will not take much time on this because I have discussed this elsewhere. So sea levels are rising for last 20,000 years. Okay, so this is the ocean here. So at the top left-hand corner, sea levels were very low. So even if they had some tsunamis before this 7,500 years ago, before the Mahabharata times, because of the water level was such that the water couldn't get inside the cave. Okay, because of this cave seal here, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner. But sea levels are rising. At some point, which is the time of Mahabharata, they were such, and then a tsunami-like situation happened, which we have evidence around the world. I'm going to show you on the next slide. Suddenly, sea level rise of 6.5 meters, that's like a 20 feet. Or in Dwarka area, a sea level rise of 23 meters. Like say take 20, that's 20 times 3, that is what, 60 feet. Heaven's sake, right? 60 feet sudden sea level rise. And it's not just a one-time rise that it stayed there and it didn't go back. Actually, it came up and just stayed there. In fact, it went up plus 3 meters and it stayed that way for additional 2000 plus years and then came back to where it is today. But out of that 23, the 20 meters that it came up, it never went down. Okay, that happened at the time of Dwarka flooding. How fascinating. So what happened is the water level, ocean level rose so much, and it's going to change for every location. But in this Sumatra island, it's rose so much that look at the picture in the middle on the left side. Now the water could go inside during the tsunami or whatever, gushing inside. And with that, it would take some sand, it will take some organic material, and it will deposit into the sand. But remember, something tsunami-like situation, water went back. Now there was a water inside the cave, it got evaporated, and it left the signature into that sand deposition with organic material. And over time, then the additional tsunamis are coming because water has not really gone down. It has only possibly gone down to that 3 meters. And anytime the additional tsunamis came, all the way to our times, we are referring to the 2004 tsunami. See, in that cave, 2004 tsunami, if you can see the picture in the middle and my cursor, it deposited this much sand. Okay, we just know it's from 2004. We can also date it. But if you go down, you are seeing different layers of sand deposited by these tsunamis in the past, in the last 8,000 years, last 7,500 years. Very fascinating evidence. Okay, but I want to summarize this. So what I showed you is summarized here with number 6, okay, Banda Aceh area of Indonesia, Sumatra Island, that also corroborates Krishna's Dwarka flooding in 5525 BCE. The other area, other evidence we have discussed, at least most of it, so I'm not going to go in detail. I just said it, Arabian Sea in Dwarka, you see 15 meters rise, that's a 45 feet sudden rise in 5525 BC, additional 8-meter rise in the next millennium, and actually water going plus 3 meters up, staying there for 2000 years. That's why we had a Dholavira and Lothal as a port on the in Gujarat side. Or if you go to Tamil Nadu, we had Mayuram as a port, as a functional port for 2000 years, between 6000 BC to say 4000 BC. Only after that the water started receding. Okay, it's all because of that significant sea level rise, tsunami, etc., around 5525 BC. In Caribbean, West Indies, we have 7 different locations where we see a sudden rise of 6.5 meters. That's about 20 feet. As I said, every place will experience it different. It's a very complex phenomenon. What happens to the subsidence of the land, what happens to the sea levels, the turbulence, and so on and so forth. But it's very consistent. It's happening around 5525 BC around the world. The Black Sea Formation, which is now a brackish sea, a saltwater sea in Turkey. Black Sea simply did not exist before 5525 BC. When suddenly the water level went up in Atlantic. From Atlantic, it went to Mediterranean to Aegean Sea to Sea of Marmara. Then that pressure forced through the Bosphorus Channel and started pouring on the other side, the north side, and it became instantaneously a Black Sea formation. The Caribbean research is a research done by Paul Blanchon and Ryan Smith and the team who did this research work at the same university in Canada where I did my master's in chemical engineering. This is going back 1995. The Black Sea Formation research, based on 9 independent scientific empirical parameters, is done by 2 geologists from Columbia University in New York, Ryan and Pittman. Okay, that's what this Black Sea Formation evidence is. Pumpuhar is done by Professor Ramaswamy. Okay, very recent evidence, 2020, where a ingress of seawater suddenly came in, destroyed the port 3 of Pumpuhar, the old port, and water came inside 10 to 20 kilometers all the way to Mayuram and stayed there for the next 2000 years. Mayuram was a port. If you go today, Mayuram is not a port. I was talking to Sanjay Dikshitji the other day, and he said he has been to that place, and Mayuram is now inland, 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers, something like this. But it was a port, acted as a port for 2000 years. Great Barrier Reef, there is evidence to show that there was a sudden change in the sea levels in that time more than 7,000 years ago. Again, the timing of flooding of Dwarka. And then recently, somebody also pointed to me, again, in social media, sometimes they use the handles and their real name is not visible, so I can't acknowledge them with their true name. But somebody mentioned the Dogger Bank in between the UK, United Kingdom, and the Scandinavian places like Norway. That place also suddenly went underwater, that Dogger Bank area, again, 5525 BCE. And if you go to the east coast of Maine, just along the Canadian border there, you will see that there is also evidence of a sudden sea level rise in the 5525 BCE. Okay, so that's the evidence. I'll quickly, Adityaji, tell me if we have already gone over time. I can skip this and we may do it next time. But if we have a time, I will discuss this. This is my last slide.
No, please continue.
Okay. So this is now another very interesting thing. And why, Adityaji, this is important is those people who are jumping into research of ancient Indian civilization or any world civilization, this can be very useful, which is to say why we cannot take the statement like a Shabda Praman at a face value. That is not to say we deny the Shabda Praman, but it needs to be understood with a common sense. It needs to be understood with other evidence surrounding that particular evidence, and it needs to be understood with a vivek, with a tarka, with a logic, okay, with a logical reasoning in a tarka shastra fashion, not tarka dushta fashion. This is very interesting. I'm researching this for many years, and this is when this reference was employed by late Dr. P.V. Vartak, great astronomer, wonderful researcher, amazing researcher. Frankly, I have not seen researcher. I don't know of any researcher in this space who comes anywhere close to Dr. P.V. Vartak. Okay. I mean, that person will not come within even the 1,000 miles, metaphorically speaking, of the caliber of what Dr. P.V. Vartak did. Now, that is not to say what everything P.V. Vartak did is correct. Okay. I mean, for example, with the Ramayana dating, I have told you this story, Aditya ji. When I met Vartak ji, and so I told about the Mahabharata and we had a wonderful discussion. And then I said, I have also completed my work on Ramayana. I think this was in 2012, if I remember. Yeah, 2012, early 2012. And then he said, oh, so what is your date? And I said, well, doctor, this is different than yours by 5,000 years. And he said, yeah, please tell me. And so he had estimated 7,300 BC, which I'm saying is decisively false. And I consider him my guru. This is very important to realize, because a person with a very low intellect will be incapable of understanding how can he be my guru. I hold him in the highest esteem. I am saying I cannot think of any other researcher, frankly, including myself, who can come anywhere close to 1,000 miles of the intellect and the sharpness and the amazing work that Dr. Vartak has done. So for this, I consider him as my guru, as an inspiration, and I can assert that he is on the Ramayana, he's wrong. To even just comprehend this, that's where you began, Aditya ji. Person needs a very different kind of intellect. Okay, but back to this subject. So what this comes from the Virata Parva. And the reference says, of course, Vaishampayan is narrating, as we said, Vaishampayan is narrating. But as you know, when Vaishampayan Uvacha comes, then Vaishampayan says something. But as he tells the story, he starts telling the stories from the mouth of the characters of Mahabharata. For example, then it comes Uttara Uvacha, like, Uttara is getting, with a Bruhannila, which is Arjun now in a female form. He's there. And so now there is a dialogue between Uttara and Bruhannila, which is actually Arjun. But don't forget that it is Vaishampayan who is narrating this story. And that's very important. And we will see why it is important. So what this is said, this is a story about the history of the Gandhiva bow. Okay, the Dhanusha that Arjun carried, okay, during the Mahabharata war. It's called Gandhiva. And what is it saying? It says, in the past, Brahma had it for 1,000 years or thousands of years. Okay. Then Prajapati, 505 Sautin, whatever, 503 years. Then Indra had it for Pachasi Varsha. I don't know what that means, 50 years, or don't know what that Hindi, I don't know how to translate. Then after Indra, Soma had it for 500 years. Okay. Then Varun had it for 100 years. So he's just giving a history of that. The last statement is important, but not all other statements are equally important. Adharayat or Dharayat, then Arjun is having it for 65 years. Pancha Sha Shashtim. Now, if you don't interpret this properly, it can lead to delusion, confusion, chaos. Let's do this first interpretation, which many people have done, but without giving a damn to what are the consequences of it. So what people have taken this and said, oh, therefore, at the time of a Gograhan, this is when Kauravas had attacked the Virata kingdom, and take away the cows, and nobody was in the capital. And so all the kings have gone to another fight, and including Bhima and all. So now Arjuna goes there as a Bruhannila, okay, and then he fights the Kaurava army and wins. That is the timing of it. And so some people have literally interpreted this, Aditya ji, to mean that at that point itself, Arjuna had this Gandhiva Dhanusha for 65 years. Now, that cannot be the correct interpretation. Why do I say that? Just use the simple common sense and rest of the evidence. If Arjuna is carrying it at that time for 65 years, and we know Mahabharata tells us exactly when Arjuna received the Gandhiva Dhanusha, right, Aditya ji? It is at the Khandava Vana Dahan, okay, from the Agni and from Varuna there. So additional evidence also tells us that Arjuna has to be a minimum of 35 years old. Can be higher, but not lower, or 33. Minimum of 35, 33 years old. Let's take 35 at the time of the Khandava one. because so many other things have already happened in his life. We just know the tracking of those from the Mahabharata evidence. So now if you take 65 years, so that time he got the Gandhiva Dhanusha, now he's carrying for 65 years to the day of Gograhana. What does that mean? So now Arjun is at least 100 years old, right at that time, which is same time as the Mahabharata war, because Mahabharata war happened the next year. So Arjuna then has to be 100 years old at the time of Mahabharata war. What is the problem with that? There are a lot of problems with it. For example, Drona is 85 years old. And remember, Drona was a guru of Arjuna. Now, of course, a young person can be a guru to the old person. That is not a problem. But when Drona was a guru, when Bhishmacharya appointed Drona as a guru to Pandavas and Kauravas, actually Drona was a grown-up person, but Arjun was not. The Pandavas were not. They were still young boys. Therefore, this particular interpretation cannot be correct. So then what is the correct interpretation? And I'm going to give you quickly, in a very short way, this interpretation. Now, remember, Vaishampayana is saying this also. Now, when is Vaishampayana saying this? Vaishampayana is saying this to Janmejaya. As you said, Mahabharata is already written 18 years after. Then total of 36 years have gone by from the time of Mahabharata war. Now Pandavas are gone. Krishna's avatar is over. Then Parikshit is on the kingdom. Now Parikshit is gone. Now Vaishampayana is telling this to Janmejaya. That is the time we are saying. In this context, Vaishampayana is saying something that has already happened. And so when we are telling the story, like Shivaji's story, or a previous story, Ramayana, Mahabharata, sometimes we use the present tense and sometimes we go and tell the thing as if it's happening now, although it has happened in the past. That is what has happened. So now if you take 65 years as referring to the total time that Arjuna had this Gandhiva bow, Gandhiva Dhanusha, now everything falls in place. How? So for that, we need to know when Arjun received the Gandhiva Dhanusha, which is at the time of Khandava Vana Dahana. Okay, we don't know the exact time. Let's call it X. Now we also know when finally Arjuna gave up the Gandhiva Dhanusha. That reference comes from the Mahaprasthana Parva, or the 17th Parva of a Mahabharata, where it is in the presence of Brahma again. Arjun, he says, now the purpose of the Gandhiva bow is done. Now they are going for their Mahaprasthan into the Himalayas, and he throws it into a lake. That reference is what I'm showing you on the left side. Okay, so Arjuna had it until 5525 BC, because Arjuna's timing is the same as Krishna's passing away. As soon as Krishna passed away, Arjuna took the Dwarka Striya to Hastinapur. They put different, the Parikshit on the kingdom and Arjuna's grandson on for Indraprastha. And very soon they left for the Mahaprasthan. So the year is more or less the same time. Now, from there, we will say subtract 65 years for that time when Arjun was carrying the Gandhiva bow. Now that takes you to 5590 BCE as the time of Khandava Vana Dahan. Now, Arjun and Krishna are more or less of the same age. So Arjun was also born around 5633 BC. It could be plus minus 1 year, and that's fine. So how old was Arjuna at that time? 5590 BC. Arjuna was around 40 years old, 40, 42, something like this. Now, that also validates that condition that Arjuna has to be more than 35 years at the time of Khandava, and everything fits perfectly. Okay, so the reason I spend time on this is that is how original research is done. It's not about reading some line and just posting it in a social media or some discussion forum and thinking the research is done. Okay, quickly, these are my books. If you are in India and if you are outside India, then through Amazon. I won't read this, but quick summary of a Krishna's life. He lived 407 plus years. He was born in Shravan, a month, of course, that everyone will agree, but everyone has to also comprehend why I by mistake, I wrote down 2728. I have to go back and check whether it's a 1718 or 2728. It could be a typo. But definitely year 5633 BC. He lived in that initial area of the Vraja, Gokula, Vrindavan until 7 years old. Then Nanda migrated until 11 years old. They lived there. At 11, Krishna killed Kamsa. Then they stayed in Mathura for a few years. Then went to Sandipani. He did his graduation very fast, accelerated graduation. And, he challenged each course, so to say, the way the challenges are offered in American university system. You can challenge the course, give the exam, and you get the credit. He very fast went through this process. He gave the Guru Dakshina in the form of rescuing Guru's son. He also got the council called Pachajanya. Okay. And we fast forward to Khandavan, for example, 5590 BCE, Mahabharata War, 5561 BCE, and then the flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka in 5525 BC. And we looked at a lot of evidence for all of this: astronomy evidence, geology evidence, oceanography evidence. I hope I did not bore you, Aditya.
No, I always love these topics. That's why people call me boring when I discuss any other topic. I usually get comments, keep quiet, let the other guy speak. They say, Aditya ji, you're not making sense. So they make these kind of comments. I'm happy with that.
But this last one, I'm glad I got a chance to discuss that, because see, that's how the research has to happen. You cannot take something at a face value. It's okay to start there. Okay to start at the face value, nothing wrong. But if you just stop there, then it might lead to confusion and delusion and a total chaos.
So confusion, delusion, and chaos are the three qualities of many of the Vedic researchers.
Yes,
Because
unfortunately.
they go to Wikipedia University and they listen to many Padma Shri awardees who are the Western sepoys of Indian Indologists,
Yeah.
coconuts. And so when they keep on listening to them, so they are playing into the hands of these colonial people who are trying to tell you Krishna was not real.
Yeah.
And Krishna is not a historical personality. So there are three major qualities which I just said: confusion, delusion, and
Chaos. Yeah.
chaos. And they start questioning, how can Krishna do this? Very famous saint Prabhupada said it. In Hindi, they said, Krishna sale tera baap ka mal hai. That's what he said in Hindi.
You may need to translate, and it may not be easy to translate.
So Krishna is, the best people who understand. Like Arjun says, Pavitram Paramamahan Asita Devala Vyasa Bravishi mein. When the great people talk about it, then there are some other people who say, you find out Krishna yourself. Don't rely on parampara. So then you can imagine anything you want. You can have a blue alligator calling as Krishna or anyone else.
Yeah.
You have to rely on Vyasadev. You have to rely on great rishis. That's how you make logical conclusion.
Correct.
So people who reject parampara, they are as harmful as the people who accept Western Indologist viewpoint. Both are equal category.
Yeah.
Otherwise, chaos, delusion can be easily stopped.
Yeah. And I will add something to the people who reject the parampara. Very much they are adding to that confusion, chaos, and delusion. Also, the people who have a very twisted definition of accepting parampara, very blindly accepting parampara too, right?
Selective also.
Selective and very blindly, because see, to understand everything, you have to look at the whole evidence. Okay, from any place. Before we stop, one question, and of course I can ask that question to you offline, but do check with your technical team if something is possible. Just what you just said, chaos, and then Wikipedia, and then the Padma Shri awardees, and it doesn't have to be Padma Shri awardee, but the point is these people who just continue this Western narrative, it's getting tiring. Like I listened to one talk this morning. Okay, the person went on saying that, hey, I don't want to get into the controversy of if Aryan came from outside or they went from here to outside. And the next minute, she went on talking about Aryan coming from outside. Okay, so she doesn't want to get into controversy. She doesn't want to discuss the evidence, but she's convinced that they came from outside. I mean, it's a very respectable person, by the way. I mean, she's erudite and she's well read when it comes to Vedas. Okay, and her knowledge. I mean, it's worth listening to her other stuff. But I actually put a comment on her Twitter. I'm saying if the premise is wrong, then everything is going to go downhill. It doesn't matter what other information, useful information you have. Okay, and many people, yeah.
I
So
don't know
so
the.
Mike,
Yes, go
you
ahead.
know the name?
I know. I don't take any name here.
No, I won't take the name either.
Yeah.
But what I want to suggest, and technologically this must be possible, is like sometime, and this is not about the person, not at all about the person, because it's a phenomenon. I mean, there are the names change, but the nonsense, same nonsense continues, and we are focused on that nonsense. We are not so much worried about or concerned about the individuals who are propounding that nonsense. That is for people to decide. But if we can, in our show, when we do it, if we can even play the film, like able to play that clip and stop it at certain point and discuss it, it is worth doing it, because I am seeing so many of these, and I don't have a very easy mechanism to give a rebuttal to them. And especially if I have to write it, it gets lost. I mean, who reads these days?
In the
So
next
just
show.
some
So
food
the
for
next show
thought.
we'll do that. In the next show we'll do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's
So
do
we
it.
will experiment with it, and we will
Yeah.
do it. We'll try to do it.
And my only point to those people who self contradict themselves is, without taking the name, I don't know the name also. So is that those people have never read the Veda. They are called Vedavad Rata.
Hmm.
They are the true Raita wing of the Vedavad.
That word I read yesterday on the Twitter. This Raita versus traditional, like a trad versus Raita. I mean, I know both words. I didn't know that there was this fight going on, but I ran into those words the
But
other day.
Krishna used the first term, Vedvad Rata Partha Nandya Astiti Vadina.
Hmm.
So Krishna has already called them Rata. So we have to leave them over there. So
That became Raita. That
I
Vedavada.
I have no, I cannot add over there. But it will be very blasphemous for us to add something to Krishna's words. But people can imagine that they can add the I for creative aspects. It becomes a
Yeah.
raita, but raita is very tasty, by the way.
Yeah. Yes.
So thank you all for watching, and we try to make it light because you digested a lot of things. So there's a humor in the end. So do watch the show till the end and from the beginning also. Okay, namaste.
Namaste.